I love that we're at a global business forum, but actually I'm speaking to two gentlemen that were both born in New York City, and you've risen to the top of your game in your various industries. What is the one thing that has made your success? Bob Iger.
Hard work. I've loved what I do throughout my career, 45 years, and that's enabled me to just apply myself and work hard.
Okay, the second one. A lot of people work hard.
Great mentors. I've had some fantastic teachers along the way. If you want me to add a third, luck. Just great luck.
Jamie Dimon?
Yeah, I would add, I mean, he's done a great job, and I'd add that. I've always told you, I've learned a lot by watching other people too, how they deal with things and issues. But absolutely hard work, try to be disciplined, and not always done that, and then luck. I mean, I think there's a big element that I don't care what you do in life, but you got to navigate it, and things happen in ways you don't expect.
Okay, but what does it mean being a leader in 2019, and how has that changed in the last 10 years?
Well, I think being a leader today is probably different because the world is changing much faster. Technology clearly is increasing the speed of change, no matter what direction you look. Far more disruption than ever before, and I think it requires a patience, it requires guts, more ability to take risks, and an ability to make decisions without having all the answers, because the answers are harder to get at given the speed of change.
Is it more difficult to navigate because of the changing political system?
I think there's certain things that don't change. I mean, discipline, detail, analytics, facts, stuff like that. Personal relationships, trusting people, earning trust every day. Those are the same. The speed is unbelievable. Yeah. And the thing about the speed, which may be true in your business too, is you can organize. You have to organize around it differently. So that agile technology means agile management. So you can have little teams that can do stuff that used to take hundreds of people to do it, 6 people can do it, and your competitors are moving that much faster. And the second, I think, is the global political complexity of corporate roles and how you do that. So dealing with being a productive part of the collaborative discussion with government to get things done that are good for countries.
Okay, what advice would you give, and what advice would you take from politicians?
Well, I seek advice from politicians when it comes to regulation in various countries around the world, get advice about government relations and knowledge that they may have of government officials in countries we're doing business. But most politicians that you deal with have never been in business. And so seeking business advice from politicians is not something I typically do. I respect their opinion on things. Certainly, they help us enter markets. But it's pretty limited to that.
Jamie?
Policy is complicated, and collaboration is necessary, and that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So you see a lot of policies that are supposed to lift up the people of the country, and they drag them down. And so I give you a million examples of that. So I think a really good politician should figure out the policy, figure out what can be achieved in the political environment, and then get it done, as opposed to going with the wind and thinking oversimplistic things are actually going to work. Countries, you've seen countries around the world that are doing great for the people. You see countries around the world that are doing terrible. And the terrible is always in the name of good. Always. Just listen to the politicians out there. So do the right policy and move on. If you don't get reelected, so be it.
How often do you get asked if you want to run for president or run for public office?
Pretty often.
And your answer has always been no. Not now?
No, my answer hasn't always been no, but my answer is no now. I considered it at one point. I discussed it with my wife. She had a funny line. She said, "You can run for any office that you'd like, just not with this wife." In other words, find someone else. Thought that was somewhat discouraging.
How many times have you been asked?
People ask, and I think that I see people ask all the time, hundreds of different people. So I don't think someone should be flattered by the fact that people ask. I'm not going to. I love what I do. I think we can make a huge productive contribution around the world just from the platform I have.
Is that because you feel like you can make a bigger difference as chief executive? Or is it because you're not made for public office?
I think it's the best I can do. I mean, the best I can do is to do my job really well, and that does lift up people around the world. If I can finance economies and cities and states and participate, and I love it, and then I'll do something else one day.
Is there a vacuum left by politics and politicians that chief executives must fill?
I hope not. I hope not. I don't think there's anything wrong with a chief executive going into politics, but no, I don't think it's about a vacuum that has to be filled. I think, by the way, the world needs great leaders, and I think our political system, at least in the United States, is not designed right now to necessarily develop great leaders or to encourage more people to seek public office. It just is far more difficult. Now, I've never been in it, but from what I observe, it's far more difficult to run for office today than ever before. And if you do it as a sitting CEO, it's virtually impossible. You can't run your company and run for office at the same time.
Yeah, I would say there's probably an overlap of skills between a CEO and a good politician, but it's not a complete overlap. And that you're basically getting into a ring, which is far more complicated than you've ever dealt with before in the political ring. So you're going to see a lot of CEOs, they try it, and it's a dismal failure because they didn't have that other part of the skills. And a lot of people, you learn the retail political skills is a skill, to get out there and talk to people and listen to everything and take questions at town halls. And I wouldn't expect every CEO to be good at something like that.
The other thing that's obvious to me is that as a CEO, you can exhort your people to communicate with one another, to collaborate with one another, to trust one another. You get into an elected office, and it's almost impossible to get that from the people you need to get it from. And so it makes it much harder to be productive. And as CEOs, we're used to being productive. That's how we get graded. I'm not sure politicians or elected officials necessarily get graded on productivity. It's almost not expected of them at this point, which is not necessarily a great place for us to be.
Can I just add to that?
Yep.
I think every political organization, I'm talking about the agencies, the departments, and I'd say around the world, owes the citizens, you gave me this money for A, B, and C, and not input, what did you accomplish? Because we spend $4 trillion a year, and I don't see a lot of people evaluating what we spend it on and did we get it. I mean, it's easy to say we should do more, but as you all know, broken systems, you can throw all the money you want at broken systems, and they still are broken, and they just suck up more money.
But you have
No
to
return on invested capital. You ever hear of
Exactly.
ROIC of a politician or an elected official?
Right.
But you have to be popular as a politician. Do you have to be popular as a chief executive?
You have to be what?
Popular. Do people have to like you?
No, I don't think you have to be liked. I think you have to be respected. I think it goes a long way. I think you have to be appreciated. It's not a popularity contest. I think if you try to run a popularity contest, then you don't make the tough decisions. And that's difficult. I think you have to be fair and known as someone that is fair and accessible and communicative. And there are a number of things that are critical, but popularity is not one of them.
You don't have to be liked. You just need
No,
to get the
I
results.
agree with what Bob just
Yeah.
said, yeah.
Respected.
Respected. Bob Iger, you have a new book out. What did you learn about yourself writing it?
My shameless plug for my book. I wrote a book about being
And
CEO.
I want to sign copies.
I will sign a copy. I was CEO of the Walt Disney Company about 15 years. I call it a ride of a lifetime. It's been a really interesting experience for me, and the company has been transformed during my time because of a lot of our acquisitions in a world that is changing so fast. And a company that was founded in 1923, maintaining its relevance in today's world. In terms of what I learned about myself, I learned that I obviously have persistence to last 45 years at a company and a business. And again, what we talked about earlier, the value of hard work and mentorship and luck.
You talk about going to China to also do and sign some of the parks. How long do you think it will, take for China to retrust the U.S. again, given the trade war?
Well, we look at China in perhaps a different way. Look, there are clearly issues that have to get dealt with, trade-related issues, serious trade-related issues. I actually look at China, though, as more of a glass half full, at least for our company. It was a market that was relatively inaccessible to us for a long time. It's now the second largest movie market in the world for us. And we built a huge theme park in Shanghai with significant government support, including infrastructure, roads, mass transportation, trains, waste removal, power station, all basically at their expense. They welcomed us there and let us build Shanghai Disneyland. So we have a good relationship with the government of China and local governments in China, and our access has actually increased over time. Should there be a level playing field in certain circumstances? Absolutely. Are there other issues that have to get dealt with? Intellectual property protection being one, cybersecurity another, of course. But I generally, at least as the CEO of the Walt Disney Company, look at China quite favorably.
How much do you worry about the trade war impacting the world economy?
Yeah, well, it is. So I agree with Bob. The trade issue is serious. It has to be dealt with. The method could have been different, whether the tariffs work, but a lot of people say it's the only thing you can try. So it's serious. But I think there should be a little more, people should look at China a little bit differently. And I say this out of respect. They don't have enough food, water, and energy. Their neighbors are really complicated, including the Koreas, Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and Russia. Okay? They have 500 million people living in poverty. They got a GDP per person of 10,000. America has all the food, water, and energy we need. We have wonderful neighbors in Mexico and Canada. We've got the gifts that were given to us by the founding fathers called freedom of speech, freedom of religion, which led to the most innovative schools and universities and companies. And even if we do a crappy job running this country for the next 30 years, our GDP per person will be 3 times theirs 30 years from now. And I'm just pointing out to people that, and we have a common interest, right? We have common interest in growth, peace, nuclear deproliferation, anti-terrorism. So, it could be worked out, but it's
Environment.
Environment, and we should try to be friendly and understand their problems, and they should take trade more serious than they have.
But so what is a trade war actually about? Is it world supremacy? Is it something else?
No, it's trade. It's fair trade. They entered the WTO 17 years ago, and they could have, should have done more things. You've heard all the IP, subsidies, state-owned enterprises, domination industries. It's just get fair. Fair, and fair means kind of reciprocal. Trade has never been reciprocal, but closer to reciprocal in a way that's good for everybody. And I hope we get there. I don't expect it to happen before the elections, to tell you the truth, but I hope after that we have a fair trade deal.
You have one of the most successful companies in the world, one of the most known companies in the world. How are all countries different? Do they expect different things from their leaders and from their employers?
Well, I look at it more from a cultural perspective. Because of technology, in many respects, borders have broken down, and that technology enables us to tell our stories, to bring our intellectual property globally with much more ease than ever before. But it can be misleading. The world is not homogeneous. It's not a one-culture world. There's a lot of interest in local culture and respect for local culture. So as we look at the world, no two countries really are the same culturally. Even though our stories tend to be universal in nature, we have to be extremely careful when we bring our global stories into markets that we do so with a degree of respect and a degree of relevance and care about local culture.
And 5 years ago, you launched Advancing Cities, which is a program that helped, for example, in Chicago, Washington, and Paris. Why did you do that?
Yeah, so we, a lot of the companies do a lot of work to help the communities, and we saw it started with Detroit. We saw Detroit was an accident waiting to happen for 20 years. 2 former mayors went to jail. The population went from 2 million to 700,000. And we basically had a great mayor, Mayor Duggan. It was exceptional. We said, and we're one of the biggest banks there. So, and it was started by one of our predecessor banks, the National Bank of Detroit, started by General Motors. And we said, we want to go help. How can we what can we do? We don't have all of your cultural type of things, but skills, entrepreneur of color funds, affordable housing, infrastructure investing, helping not-for-profits, collaboration, and it works. I mean, if you go to Detroit today, you'd be shocked. It's working, it's turning, and I think we should make Detroit an example of America at its best, not America at its worst.
Talk to me about how you want to be remembered at the company when you leave the company, both of you. Maybe we'll start with Bob
What was the
Iger.
question?
Say it again?
What you want to be remembered for.
Oh,
Right.
well, I inherited a company that was founded almost 100 years ago. And if you look back at the history of companies, and you look at the companies that existed in the 1920s when Disney was founded, and how many of them are still globally relevant today, there are not many. So more than anything, maintaining Disney's presence in the world as a positive force in this world. So when you think of the world today, I believe that the importance of art and entertainment and basically manufacturing fun, enabling people to hear stories and watch stories has never been more important. So Disney's position in the world as a relevant company, as an important company, 100 years after its founding, that's what I'd like to be known for.
When I first became CEO of Bank One years ago, former CEO came to see me and said, "You've got to make a mark, have a legacy, have something that people remember." I always say to myself, if a CEO does that, sell the stock. These are large, complex companies that operate in 100 countries around the world with technology and people and reputation risk and all these various things. I just want to do the same thing. I want to take what I got, hand it off to someone else better than where they found it, and hopefully they're going to take it. 1799, by the way, is predecessor companies of ours, and just make it better and leave it a healthy, vibrant institution that people say the SOB did a kind of a good job while I was here.
But do you worry about the bank of Amazon or the bank of Google?
Of course, but you're always going to have competition, and so we compete aggressively, but I expect that to happen one day somewhere from around the world, and we look at that around the world. The Chinese banks are now bigger than we are, not in terms of market cap, but in terms of balance sheet and stuff like that. You're going to have very aggressive companies trying to compete in our business, and And my job is to make sure I leave it healthier than I found it.
So I also learned that Jamie Dimon, many years ago, pitched a movie, a film, to Bob Iger. And
He
it didn't
did.
go so great, so we're going to give him a second chance.
It was, no, let's not. It was very gutsy of him. When you're in the movie business and the head of a bank comes in with a movie idea, I mean, you show respect, but you don't take it very seriously.
He owed us a lot of money, but so
And I was very direct with him. I said, that's just a bad idea. You're a great banker, but...
He graded it. He listened to me. I gave him like a 1-minute pitch, and he said, it's a C.
By the way, can you imagine if I came in and gave him any ideas about how to run his bank?
Exactly.
Are
I
we
don't
doing
think a movie guy doing
Are we
that?
doing an elevator pitch? We have 30 seconds left.
We should,
Do you want to get a?
we should swap jobs for a while and see what happens.
It was about
companies.
marriage. It was a marriage counseling thing, something like that, right?
It was about a woman who couldn't pick men very well, so she'd have a board of directors of women who would be testing men for her and picking her husband.
There might be some other movie There might be some other movie executives in the room that would be glad to consider
And
James'
Bette Midler,
idea.
I said Bette Midler should be part of the cast, and that woman in Veep.
I feel
woman
like
in
we have
V.
a collaboration. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you.